there will be a lot of people who will tell you to work on your weaknesses. I'm a big fan of accentuating your strengths.
Sure.
Because sure, you should be aware of your weaknesses and you should acknowledge when it gets in the way of your strengths. But if you focus so much on your weaknesses, you will never grow. If you work on accentuating your strengths, the sky is the limit. There's no question about it.
They say the pen is mightier than the sword, but is a blog mightier than a bludgeon? A newsletter more fearsome than a firearm? A YouTube channel more powerful than a howitzer? Today's topic is building a loyal community through content. Unless you have some kind of billionaire bankrolling you with buku dollars to lay a foundation of shiny green astroturf, you're going to take a grassroots approach by finding a specific niche audience and producing content that speaks to them like nobody else does. This is true whether you're a publisher whose product is the content or a brand whose content is part of a broader strategy. One such micro media platform is Indie Agency News, which is, quote, building the home for independent agencies. And they might be at the point where they can change that to built. The site is founded and led by our guest, Doug Zanger, also known as Zanger. Welcome to Please Advise.
Hello. How are you?
Doing good. How are you?
Very good.
We also got Jake with us. Jake is our content strategist and normal guy.
Forgot that was my my descriptor on here the first time we did this.
Yeah.
Normal guy?
I just had people were like, "Oh, put your position in here," and I just my title said normal guy.
Well, thanks for joining us, Doug. We want to talk about Indie Agency News, and let's start with like the very beginning. Where did you get the idea? What inspired you to found it?
I'd always known that throughout my career, I really liked the indie space. And for Act 1 of my career was radio. Act 2 of my career was global B2B events with Stillwell Partners, the Advertising Week folks. And then I went to trade media as a journalist and an editor. So I was the first editor in the US for the Drum, and then went over to be editor at Adweek. After that, went to the Martin Agency. But in the back of my mind, I a couple of things. Number one, I really enjoyed being at the Drum and at Adweek. Going to Martin was great. I enjoyed the experience. But again, in the places where it's been overly corporate, I tended to not do particularly well. And that's just the reality. I mean, there are some people a lot of people who vibe off of a corporate thing. And there are those of us who understand that that's part and parcel of this industry, but our choice is to be somewhere else, somewhere that's a little different, which is indies. And I think throughout my career too, the most supportive community, and I'm not saying like the holdcos weren't supportive, but the indies felt very supportive. And honestly, it felt like home in a lot of ways. So I had missed being in the journalism space. Knew that, you see the color of my hair, I've been around for a minute. And so what were the two things that I really liked? I really like broadcast, and I really like the indie thing, and I really like indie agencies. And I also know that indie agencies do great work, and a lot of marketers and brands are familiar-ish with indies, but there really wasn't a clearly defined home. Now, to caveat that, Ad Age does a great job with small agency. Little Black Book is fantastic. So what was different was, could I create something that feels more like broadcast and less a traditional trade? And the answer is we're getting there on it. But really the genesis of this started, and when I was at the Drum and at Adweek, it had always been in the back of my mind. But when I went out on my own after the Martin Agency, that was the time to start building it. And There have been different iterations of this thing. We're probably at version 1.3 right now. It's far from where I believe it can be and where it should be. But I also know that it takes time to build it, and it's incumbent upon us to grow it with the members. Being half Italian, I have a deep sense of loyalty. So the members that we have, I'm very loyal to. And I want to listen to them constantly, because ultimately, what is this? This thing is a visibility platform that combines editorial style content. And it goes more on the content side. Let's be honest. It's not hardcore journalism. It's not. It has the trappings of it, more in line with what we call service journalism. And then the other piece of it is this consulting layer underneath it, where members can book time and talk about the things that are important to them. And again, going back to this idea of visibility, I don't care where our members get visibility as long as they get it. If they have a client that wants to be an ad age, I will spend 15 minutes looking at the pitch, looking at the press release. So when they send it to Brian Bonilla, it's better. It's a better pitch, hopefully a better pitch, and gives them a better chance. So it is a little, I'm inverting a lot of the things that people are used to in this business. But again, going back to the brief of this is to build the global home for independent agencies. And the mission is to serve indies and the brilliant people behind them. And the goal is more visibility for indies and more choice for marketers.
Yeah, because like a trade publication shouldn't consider itself like serving the industry that it's reporting
yes
on, right?
No. Yes and no. Yeah. So yes. So in the traditional trade dynamic, absolutely, they need to have some level of separation between it. And people had said, "Why did you call this indie agency news?" I said, "Well, I had to call it something." and it had to be direct. I couldn't.
I couldn't. It explains itself.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. Before,
I didn't have to write out a long intro about what indie agency news is.
No, and I think earlier in my career, I started as a copywriter, and I would try to be evocative and abstract, and nobody fucking needs that anymore. I mean, I get it, but it's just this is what it is. It is news about and especially about our members, and our members always get priority.
That was big when I was starting out as a copywriter, was like writing website copy, was like name the about page something like evocative but confusing. Like don't call the blog a blog. Call it like, I don't know,
musings.
Musings. Yeah. Make the navigation impossible to use.
Right.
But it has the vibe.
Like many people end up in this industry, I didn't study anything that would make it to where I would be good at it. Like I have a background in like political science, and I have a master's in philosophy, right? Like
international studies.
That comes in hand.
Yeah, I got international studies.
And I remember like getting a job working it was an unpaid internship that a bunch of people fought for, and it was like you just get to write for a company that does reviews for like when Netflix first started really streaming and getting away from the DVDs. And it was like every article was like a cinematic experience through the written word. It wasn't like a movie review,
right?
Which I thought was the most like, I don't know, like
bougie.
Yeah. I don't want to do that on camera. Sorry, Sam. But like bougie, but like, oh my God, what are we talking? Masturbatory, maybe that's the word. And my editor was very insistent. Yeah, was very insistent on having it be like that essentially, which was just. Oh no, we can't call this. You're not reviewing this. You're offering an
insight.
Yeah, and I'm like, I don't have any insight. I'm 19 years old. Like, I need beer money. So
right.
like,
that's an insight. Yeah.
But interesting nonetheless to see the way that it, I guess, evolved back to I guess being more like boilerplate. I don't know.
Direct. I think boilerplate's not the right word for it. I think that the one thing that I like to talk about, and I have for a long time, is can you create something that's familiar but different?
Yeah.
And you see that if you read Luke Sullivan's book, hey, Whipple, squeeze this. I'm staring at it on the floor right now. Teach at Portland State University, and that's one of our books this term. Nothing is new. Nothing is original. It is remixing. It's remaking. And this idea of building something familiar that may be a little bit different, I think that allows for people to get out of their own heads, get out of the zone that they're used to or comfortable with. And I think that with this, it's in some ways a news site, but where people, I don't want to say get confused, but for the longest time, there has been this dynamic of I am the agency or the company, Doug is the journalist or the editor. Therefore, by the transitive property, it needs to be this, that, and the other thing. No, this is very similar, where you let me know what's going on. Yet the way into this is, if I see something interesting, think of me more as a segment producer in TV. So as context, I was a morning show producer in radio. Did that for 3 years, I think it was. Waking up at 3 a.m. It was great.
It's changed.
No, it hasn't. I still get up at, now I'm getting up at 3:30 in the morning. Thanks to the dog. No, but I think that the thing is, when I see something that a member is doing, and Sam and I talked about this, about, the client in Austin that does vasectomies. And I said, yeah, let's talk about that. That's interesting. I wouldn't have done that at Adweek. I wouldn't have done that at the Drum. But here's where part of this too is what I'm trying to build here is empathetic content. So the empathetic side of this is, you might not have a vasectomy doctor, but you may have another client in a category that's challenging, whether it's regulatory, whether it's digital platform rules. So the thinking here is, yeah, we're talking about vasectomies, but you might be an agency that has a cannabis brand, or there is another medical procedure that there's regulation around and there's some limits around it. So the hope here is that we put together empathetic things where people can learn and put it in hopefully an entertaining package. That's really the big thing, is the first rule in all of this is have fun. The rest of it will take care of itself.
Yeah. I mean, I resisted reading a book about business or really furthering my education in this field, because it's also boring. But that's what that's sort of what we're trying to do here with this. And then I can see it also in indie agency news. The other thing is that the community aspect, I think, it's not like, oh, this other agency is being featured, they're my competitor. It's like, I want to learn from them and I want to see what they're up to. And when you started, did you have to define what that audience was? Is there an agreed upon what it's an indie agency?
Yeah, no, that's a really good question. The aperture is somewhat wide. And what I mean by that is, if it is publicly traded company that is in the advertising, marketing, and slightly adjacent business, doesn't count. So if it's 1% investment by WPP, doesn't qualify. If it's Accenture, doesn't qualify. PwC doesn't qualify. Ernst & Young. If you are a publicly traded, holding company, and there are some smaller ones now, the other side of it is, if it's a privately held holding company, I consider them independent. So an example of that is Mechanism. They're not members yet, but I consider them independent because that company is not publicly traded. And there is the argument of, well, private equity is problematic. Yeah, I get it. But if I don't widen the aperture a little bit, I don't think we really sense I don't sense that we would be able to grow this in the way that we really need to grow it. So, private equity is fine. Additionally, again, I go back to publicly traded within this industry. It's a little gray area. So somebody like an Ocean, for example, is owned by Hyundai, but advertising isn't Hyundai's main business. So I consider them independent. Plus, Ocean doesn't have a bunch of other brands. It's Ocean USA. It's Ocean Germany. It's Ocean. So I'm cool with that. Same with Shile. Shile is Samsung. I consider them independent as well because they have it's not like they have a bunch of different brand names under it. And I understand that people might say, well, that's not pure. It's like, well, the cocaine you're snorting probably isn't pure either. So, let's just move on.
I think in the creative space, with people who work in it being obviously creative people, there's always this, I think it comes from a place of goodness or it comes from a place of sincerity. Mm-hmm. There's this desire for like organic, pure, like I don't want to be like Coca-Cola. I don't want to be like Nestle.
You want to work with Coca-Cola.
You sure.
And you want them as a client because that money spends good.
Yeah. And there's this weird thing where like big brands want to be small brands want to be big. Yeah. And then there's everything in the middle where all of that sort of coalesces and you get, sometimes really cool stuff. And then other times you get, I don't know, the stubbornness of rather large marketing budgets that don't want to do anything interesting with the money.
Rigidity. You get rigidity because everything is now sacrificed at the altar of performance. Yeah. And that's never changed. Mm-hmm. It's not like in the 70s, let's just put $3 million and fuck it. Let's see what it does. Like, no, the sales better go up. Mm-hmm. Things better grow. Like that's never changed. The mechanism to get there has changed, but we become so enamored with every dollar has to count. Well, no shit. Yeah. I get that. But at the same time, consider fraud, consider viewability, consider all of these things, right? And if you start getting spun out of control on that, it defeats the purpose. The whole goal is to grow. The mere existence of an agency is to solve a client's business problems. That's the way it's always been. That's the way it is. That's the way it's always going to be. Again, the mechanisms are different. Digital, when it started popping off, changed a lot of things. But I also think that we have to look at these data-centric points. Yes, they're important. Absolutely, they're important. Performance is important. But for us to look at this in a very narrow way and sacrificing what makes an agency great, and I credit Bob Hoffman, the ad contrarian, for saying this. He said, agencies are the only business in the world that use creativity to solve a business problem. It's true. It's very, very true. So I think we need to get back more to that. And again, it's not like in the early days, people wanted the creative to fail. Far from it. It's like, we want this to perform. Of course you do. It's just common fucking sense.
I brought this up last time, and Sam and I talked about this. A company that I worked for previously had a rather large, multi-billion-dollar tech company as a client.
Cool.
And they had commercial budgets that would make great like independent movie budgets. I mean, we're talking like high 6 into 7, like approaching $1 million. And I was on the writing team for these, and I would pitch stuff to the lead writer, and she would go, "This is great. The people at multi-billion-dollar tech company are going to hate this, right? Because what they like for commercials is a family gathered around a notebook, and they're going, wow, look at the buttons you can click, because the people that run their marketing department that sign off on these budgets are all 180 billion years old, and not the cool 180 billion year old guys. They are very, and I remember like trying to pitch like, well, look at companies like Liberty Mutual And the mayhem guy for the insurance company's like, look at, they're doing interesting commercials that people actually like. They exist in the cultural zeitgeist. These places, you can reference them like, oh, the mayhem guy that falls through the roof. That's funny. Right. And they're like, yeah, no, that stuff's funny. Good luck getting anyone to approve that if you write something along the lines of, you know. And I thought the same thing that you said. I was like, I thought we were in the business of catching people's attention. Not
you got like 3 seconds to get them.
Yeah. Why are we making a commercial that could have been an infomercial in 1998?
Right.
You know, you have $1 million to do this.
Right.
So, you know.
Yeah, I was going to on the question of, you're supposed to set yourself apart. I mean, I feel like that usually comes down to a series of people who don't want to risk their jobs at the client company.
Yeah,
sure. Yeah,
I get that. Sure.
That's when you're working with a really, really big company. I find that I prefer working with a company where the owner is still in charge because they can sign off on it, right? It's not like everybody's sort of passing liability amongst one another for the success of something. And then it gets, the original idea gets whittled down into nothing. I mean, you see exceptions to that, but
well, I think the funniest, no, it's not funny because it also came at the expense of people's jobs. But like that same company that I worked for, after about a couple years of what I was talking about, experienced like 3 rounds of massive layoffs.
And that just sucks. Yeah, that's the part of this that just sucks.
It's terrible because you're like, at least for me, I'm like, I'm not saying that if you were to have created something more worthwhile that you could have kept your job, but I am saying that I feel like this highly focus grouped and rigid approach to something that is inherently creative, commercials, writing, filming things, hiring actors. Like, what are we doing? Especially if you have the means to do something different, I guess.
Well, to the point of, focus grouping testing, I did have a question about how, back to indie agency news, how you measure, what content is succeeding and sort of build out and evolve like your content buckets and strategy from that. Because I've noticed like the sort of the types of shows you do change, and
it's fairly consistent. Honestly, the thing about this thing is it's not a traffic monster. It's niche. I mean, it's super niche. But it's super interesting. The biggest KPI that I talk about is vibe. And people go, what? Well, that doesn't do anything. I said, well, if I create something that people don't like, they're not going to be here. If I create things that people really enjoy being a part of, then the rest of it should take care of itself. So in terms of metrics, we're not huge, but we've grown organically. We show up in a lot of places. We're pretty noisy. This is the analogy for those who are familiar with the Premier League. Sir Alex Ferguson, who was at Manchester United for a long time, used to call Manchester City the noisy neighbors. I'd like to be the noisy neighbor. And the numbers will grow, but I won't sacrifice building something with the members in mind, because ultimately this is the members' platform. I'm simply here to shepherd it along. Going back to the loyalty thing, if you're willing to invest in this, I'll do everything in my power, because ultimately this is a visibility platform. When you engage with this, when you keep me in the loop on things, or when we see things and catch them, put them in a newsletter or a creative roundup, that helps your visibility. And again, I want people to feel as though that they have room to grow in this. So for example, we have one member that's going to start doing a monthly show starting next year. And I want our members to raise their hand and say, you know what? I'd actually like to host one day. Great. That takes the pressure off of me. I don't want it to be the Doug Zanger show all the time. I want our members to be the stars of the show. And I work really hard to do that. And listen, I get it. Like, my style is very game showish, game show hostish. I understand. I'm very self-aware about what I am. Right. And what I love is bringing people together and making them feel good and helping them build their confidence. And that's a big piece of it. So Sam, you said earlier, yeah, Ad Age and Ad Week, they have their communities that they're building. It's a little quieter, but they're still really, really important. Ours is a little more public. Ours is a little more, you may not necessarily get the mic at some of these other places, but yeah, you know what? Yeah. I want to have a conversation with you because what 8 a.m. does may be very similar to what Drake Cooper does in Boise, might be very similar to what Bakery does in Austin, might be very similar to what Trade School does in Atlanta, right? So the whole point of this is we can build all of this together, but ultimately it comes down to taking care of the membership. So yeah, the numbers, fine. And yeah, I mean, like a couple grand, few grand a week. I don't know. Like I go in and look a whole time, but there will come a point where, yeah, we're going to have to build something a little more sophisticated. But in the meantime, as long as I know that my members are growing, whether that is in confidence, whether that is in business, visibility is the most important thing. We're not a lead factory, but what we can do is help our members tell their stories in more interesting and unique ways and help build those blocks. Now, we do have a brand thing coming up, hopefully before the end of the year. So there's going to be another member benefit that connects agencies to CMOs and brands, TBD.
Isn't that what we all want? Though
yeah, but it's meant to be done in a
point.
really honest way. I mean, it's like, you'll see. I mean, you'll see what this is because your members, you will participate.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, but I think one thing that is important is that you can't just focus on, I just want to get more business. You need to learn more about your business, and the way you do that is by learning about other people who are in it and their companies.
Yeah. And honestly, I'm 55 years old. I turned 55 this year. I have fewer fucks left to give in any of this. And honestly, the whole point of being of service to the members, that's a huge deal to me. That's a huge deal. I know how hard this is. I know how hard it is to build an agency, to run an agency. I know how hard the work is. I get it. And if I can be somebody that's a positive force to help, however, I don't get it. Like, Sam, you could call me and be like, hey, I got a thing. Yeah, let's talk about it. If it's helpful, that's all I care about. I just care about being of service. And there is such great joy in that. One of my biggest mantras is take pride, not credit. I get uncomfortable when people, start giving me props on stuff. Honestly, it's just, I'm more interested in sharing other people's stories because, and again, being self-aware, I know I'm pretty good at stringing together a conversation that's entertaining and informative at the same time. And I want people to have fun. I want people to have fun with this. And again, it's so hard. Every day is a slog in some way, shape, or form, but it doesn't have to be that way. And I don't want to be Pollyanna about it and be like, oh, it's sunny and da-da-da-da. I'm being out in the West Coast for 33 years. Yeah, but I still got my South Jersey edge. But I genuinely just care about what my members need. And that's what I'm focused on.
I wonder if to some degree, I feel like as the culture of value extraction creeps its way into every aspect of human existence, right, you end up pushing against pushing the envelope against the grain of you almost seem like you're doing something new when you're like, hey, maybe let's just not focus on the value extraction part of this creative conversation about business XYZ. Because and we were talking about earlier, it's dollar amount. I want dollar for dollar. I want lead. If I'm going to spend $2,000,
no shit. I mean, I get it, but that's not me.
No, I know. That's what I'm saying. It's that approach. I feel like I sometimes, and Sam and I have had this conversation countless times with different clients, where it's sometimes I feel like a lot of the discussions we have is convincing people that the art of spending money to make money is lost on,
Right.
and I get it because money's tight, and sometimes marketing is seen as a massive circle jerk and a waste of time.
Right.
And I get that, but it's like, you can't, if for every campaign a campaign XYZ that we run for client XYZ,
right.
if you are spending time getting into the minutia of like dollars and cents, it's like, you're kind of missing the forest for the trees if your company doesn't have a story.
Yeah.
If your brand doesn't have an identity.
And especially with agencies, they're interchangeable.
Yeah.
The interchangeability, and so a big part of what I'm trying to build here is help them differentiate themselves.
Sure.
And so this program that we're developing helps that, because it forces our members to really hone in on what their core strengths are. And when we do meet an indie agency, we ask, what are your top 3 core strengths? Because everybody, and listen, I understand it. It was the same thing with me when, as a consultant, I do these 85 things. It's like, well, okay, cool. But what do you think you're best at? Weirdly enough, I'm actually really good at speech writing. I've done 2 big ANA speeches for CMOs. Again, the kibitzing, thing with all of this.
Mm-hmm.
I know where the top 3 are. Can I do website copy? I mean, God, I'm forced to because of what it is I do. And it's my property. But God, I would love somebody to come in and just help me tweak it a little bit, because I'm sitting here putting fucking War and Peace on there, and I need the cliff notes in certain areas. I know it's heavy. So, yeah, I mean, I
have the same problem. I mean, like, it's interesting working with Sam and working in it. I'm grateful to have a place where I can figure out that I'm good at different shit.
Right.
Like, for so long, I was like, all right, Jake, you're like a pretty good copywriter, so you're just going to write this copy. And I'm like, okay, well, I can like make commercials too, and I can animate to some degree. And it's like, well, we have an animator. Go, whatever. And then
you had to keep pushing him.
Yes. And then
because he's got that fucking Philly thing.
No, Sam was the one that was like, no, you can do, fuck it. Like, make this. And some of it ended up being really good. Clients liked some of it. And it's like, okay, well now, we can offer this where maybe we could before, but now there's another person who can do it, who has a different creative approach or whatever. Like I think an example that comes to my mind is a company that we work with, that it's a construction company. They were like, can you make an entertaining, fun cartoon about asphalt? And I was like, God, I don't know.
For kids.
Yeah. They were like, it was for like elementary school kids. Took me like a week. And then I think the thing that we ended up with was actually pretty fun, but they just let us do it. And I didn't know that I could do it, which was the more of the fun part, I guess. And it ended up being, again, I don't know how many.
They needed it quick too. That was the thing. We could have done a much longer animation process, but because we have people who are on the account have multiple skills, we can just get going with it. But one thing I wanted to get back to was the idea of like not seeming to be trying to eke every loose bit of change out of every little process in marketing process of content. I think another thing is that like content is such a grind to produce that if you're a company or if you're a publisher, like I said, when we work with our clients, and a lot of them have to produce a lot of content because they can't, there needs to be so much of it for it to have an impact that they can't pay us to do it all. Part of it is like, what could you see yourself producing consistently? So like, if everyone, and I watch your LinkedIn lives, everyone's having a good time, right? And like, you keep doing it long enough and consistently enough, and then you don't need to worry about every view, right? The view count on every single video, right?
Yeah, I mean, we average like 300 to 400 for each. So yeah, there's again, it's not millions, but it's probably the right people. And I think the thing about this too is I looked back on, I was setting up another event. And so we, set these up, and we've done 195, just like some rando long, like huge number of And that's in-person events too, but we haven't done many in-person events. We're going to do more of those in 25. But yeah, I think that what, the consistency part of it's a challenge. So each day we have a theme. So Monday's radio, Tuesday's indie thinking, which is more broadly thought leadership. Wednesday's always meet an indie agency, which is agency profile. Thursday's always about the work. And then Friday's fun and games and freelancers. We're going to start highlighting freelance members. And that's part of their membership benefit as well. And then we sort of fell into something backwards. I was talking to Natalia Fredericks from Partyland, and we were talking about this thing she's doing tomorrow, actually, in LA with Andy Pearson, the global creative for Liquid Death. Name dropping. And we just started bullshitting. And so we just decided that segment's going to be called Friday Fuck About. So, and my dyed-in-the-wool Italian mother, Catholic, is not going to enjoy the language. So, but sorry, Mom, too old to care anymore. I will go to church and get it out of the way, which I did. I did go Sunday.
Sometimes my mom I also grew up, pretty religious, deep South religious. So think like True Detective season 1 religious.
Interesting.
And so she doesn't fundamentally. We grew up around a lot of smokestacks and a lot of she doesn't understand what I do. Barely understand.
My mom
doesn't understand.
Yeah, the Yellow King. Yeah. He's my uncle. Yeah, he was not a very chill guy. And so when I explained to we're gonna go film some stuff at this clinic, this urogynecological clinic. She's like, "What do you film? What do you do?" And I'm like, "Oh, you just make stuff." Which I should have a better explanation for my own job, but sometimes I really don't, and I don't know if that's just working in agencies.
Oh no, my grandparents, South Jersey, halfway between Philly and Atlantic City. When I was in radio, I was trying to explain what a producer does, and so they were both alive. So my grandmother lived to 94, my grandfather 101. And so this was 1999, 2000. And so my grandfather's in the background going, my grandmother's being polite and going, and they're like the Costanzas from Seinfeld. Mm-hmm. And my grandfather in the background said, "What's Dougie doing?" My grandmother turns around and screams, "He's on the radio!" And so we just left it at that, as Doug was on the radio. And that's all they needed to know.
My father-in-law came through one time and we were going to a concert together, and they work in construction, have their whole lives. Mm-hmm. And his buddy was like, "Now what do you do?" And I was like, "I open my laptop and then I look at it for 10 hours.
Right.
He's like, "And you pay your rent like that?" And I'm like,
"Right.
Yes, sir." And he's like, "I don't understand what you're fucking talking about." Because
and also it's a killer on my neck.
Yeah. I know. I have bed sores.
Sitting that long is terrible for your
health.
my
God, I need to stand every so often. It's the worst.
Yeah. Explaining to a guy who's had to get up at the crack of dawn and hit concrete with a hammer for the last 12 hours.
100%. 100%. And that's the thing, right? I think that it's going back to this idea of empathetic. Just everybody that I've met in indie world is real, but they're real in really it's a wheel of realness. So if you take a look at a color wheel or a personality wheel, everybody is very real, but in their own slot, right? So Sam, you and I are Philly folks. So our reel is and Brian Anderson is from Philly too, The Perception, Brownstein, Pete Madden, there's a Philly vibe. And then we just interviewed all the people from Boston, and they're very real. And there's a different vibe there. So I think the thing about this is understanding that the responsibility that we have is to do right by our clients while doing good at the same time. Because to your point, Jake, that dude that's waking up every morning at 5 a.m. and busting his ass out on the site, is so important, and we just absolutely. And listen, I most of my mom's side, they were, they again hard working, and having that lunch pail mentality isn't necessarily a bad thing at all. No. And in fact, it's one of those things where it's like, what can we contribute to in our own way to that man and woman that's going out every morning busting their ass? We have to be really respectful of that. Mm-hmm. And
that's why I like that you have freelancers. Because to me, being a freelancer is harder than running an agency. Because
so hard.
It sucks.
You are a business and you're all alone.
Oh, the voiceover. So I've been doing voiceover since the mid 90s, and that's very, very hard.
It's really difficult stuff.
Very hard to build a business.
I get hit up all the time by voiceover people, and I'm like, man, there's so many.
Oh yeah.
And they're all very talented.
Yeah, here's the thing: is people like say, "Hey, are you? I know are you doing any projects?" I'm like, I'm auditioning for the same shit you are. Like, yeah. Why would I give you the work? No, I'm kidding. Sometimes it doesn't work.
That was something too. Working with Sam, that I was like, because I do it sometimes for certain clients, because I have all of the gear necessary, because I run a show out of my.
You need a mic stand though.
I have one, and I don't like to use it. I actually don't. I don't like to use it. I feel like I can't get in it. You know what I mean? If I'm not attached.
You got hack comedian going right now.
Yeah. Thank you, man.
That vibe.
It's honestly, I am one, and you know what? That's all I can.
Are you a prop comic?
Jake is.
No, I'm. I guess if you wanted to ask what kind of comedian was, is I've just been ripping off Bill Hicks for 20 years. But doing voiceover stuff is like, you get to. I did once, like one for Sam, and it was the construction company we work for. Sam was like, "Can you do the old Southern guy voice, just a little bit of it that you do on your podcast? Can you do that, but like just a tinge lighter, so it's believable?" And I was like, "I don't know, let me see." And it was for like a career video, like a hiring video, and I was like, "At so and so company, we believe in our hard work, integrity, and blah 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 blah."
Oh my god!
Dialed it back to the point where
Black Angus.
He gave me. I think he gave me 3 versions, and the middle one was just right.
Yeah. Increasingly levels of like of racist uncle voice until you got to the Goldilocks zone.
God, that's funny.
And that's kind of how realized. Oh, that's another thing that when you're a smaller agency, people the phrase "wearing a lot of hats" always drove me nuts.
Right.
Because it's like, are you wearing a lot of hats? Or are you just doing like 6 people's jobs? What environment? But realizing you're good at stuff and having the freedom to get better at it is always what I liked about working in smaller places.
Well, and it's really interesting that you brought that up, because I've had these conversations, especially with students. So teach at Portland State University. And the thing I reminded them of was there will be a lot of people who will tell you to work on your weaknesses. I'm a big fan of accentuating your strengths.
Sure.
Because you should be aware of your weaknesses and you should acknowledge when it gets in the way of your strengths. But if you focus so much on your weaknesses, you will never grow. If you work on accentuating your strengths, the sky is the limit. There's no question about it. So there's your pithy quote for the
I love the what's it like?
But it's true. I mean, honestly, it's true. And and the other thing too is the most important thing. There's a difference between swagger and confidence, and there is nothing more rewarding than seeing things click for an independent agency and seeing them grow in confidence. And I remind indies, you belong in those rooms. You belong in those pitches. You belong in those conversations. Don't think that you don't. And I was explaining this to an agency yesterday, a member. Get the word just out of your vocabulary. And what I mean by that is agencies will say, well, we just do things in this region, or we just do things in this city. When you put the word just, that is the most destructive qualifier that you can put in it, because what you're doing is now diluting the impact of the work that your teams are putting into it. Sure, you might be focused in on one market or one region, but take a look at the work. The work generally is really good. Again, you're in service to a client and you really want to do great work. Mm-hmm. So be proud of that. The rest of it will take care of itself. But if you keep using the word just, or, oh, it's just this. No, I don't care if it's some local award that you got a bronze. That matters. Mm-hmm. That matters. Mm-hmm. Take the word just out of your vocabulary instantly.
Yeah, sometimes I get too confident and I'm like, well, I don't think there's any client that we wouldn't do amazing work for. And
sure.
But the problem is nobody wants to hear that because they're like, well, you should be a little specialized, right? And I know, but I have a process.
Right.
I have that we have, like, look at our clients. They're the asphalt company and then, a doctor and then a high-end interiors company or whatever.
Yeah. And that's all cool stuff. That's all cool stuff.
I was going to ask you, Doug, in your experience, and I don't know if it's just because of my previous experience working at larger agencies, but mm-hmm. I feel like big places have that capacity to get like what I call middle manager syndrome, where there's a lot of people who are paid a lot of money to just tell you no. And they make more money than you'll ever make, and they don't really contribute creatively to anything. In fact, their job is to sort of excise that from the agency. And so you work with maybe you're a creative director or you're a copywriter or you're an animator or something. Mm-hmm. And a client wants X, Y, or Z. A little bit to the conversation we were having earlier, where I like small to medium-sized agencies because maybe they don't have it in the budget to hire the no guy yet. Or maybe they haven't gotten there, because I've worked in middle to large agencies and I've worked in small ones. Right, and it's almost always the case that the middle to large ones have a team of people whose job it is to say, we don't do that here.
From an operational standpoint, the reality is in certain types and scales of businesses that there are people who are going to be looking very closely at allocations. Yeah. And the agency compensation model is based upon billable hours. So if you go into a situation where it looks like there's going to be more hours, you want to do it, but you know what? We're not getting paid for this. So no, we're not going to do that. So I think there's probably that going on. Mm-hmm. And it's probably a lot of that. Yeah. I would also say that at least in the holding company, and what I'm hearing, and again, this is anecdotal, don't take it for gospel, that some of those positions are being cut. And
I've heard that too.
Yeah, we'll keep seeing we'll keep seeing a lot of layoffs, I think, heading to the end of this year and going into next year, which sucks. But the good news is this can help keep the indie world going, because a lot of the people that are getting laid off now are more senior. Mm-hmm. And so I think that there's more durability to build an independent agency. And again, I think brands and CMOs, it may be very much non-AOR, but boy, there's a lot of interesting work that needs to get done. And there are a lot of indies, our members in particular, that are ready to go.
I'm always kind of what's the word I'm looking for? I take not inspiration, but when these like fly by night Instagram brands pop up out of nowhere, and I've bought
some of that shit too.
Yeah, me too. And I like, a part of me gets really cynical, and I'm like, this branding stuff doesn't work. You're reinventing the wheel.
Right.
These supplements have been around 1,000 years, or this coffee's been around 1 billion years. Like, what are we doing? And then I realized, no, it's working. You can see their sales numbers. What is it? And so I kind of I don't necessarily take inspiration, because I think some of these guys are kind of hacky and maybe a little shady. But I am like, these guys are selling something that has been around 100 years, but they're selling a story with it. And that goes to what we were talking about earlier, which is arguably one of the most important parts of this whole thing, which is that if you have a product or a service that's not new. There's nothing novel about it.
Right.
But you can sell with it a story or an experience that a client could relate to. Then you've sold them something.
Right.
And not only have you sold them your work, which hopefully is good, and I think the work that we do here is good, and obviously the work that you're doing is good, but you're selling not only your experience and your expertise, but your story as well. Whatever that means. If it's poetic and corny, fine. But
Probably.
Probably, yes, probably. But I'm always like, damn, how, obviously Coca-Cola, Nestle, whatever, huge, right? But then overnight, these companies that are selling like this coffee is different somehow, and you're like,
right.
fucking how, dude? And it's like, it's not. It's not.
It's like Zanger was saying. There's nothing new being made, even from the product side too, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah.
We're just sort of like recontextualizing, like how we feel about these things and like how they show up. And
like Heinz with this, and Coke with the personalized bottles, and it's
The example I use sometimes when talking, Sam and I've talked about this, the Black Rifle Coffee Company, I think is brilliant. Like whatever their whole part of the world, I don't necessarily associate with
right
a lot, but I'm like, you made coffee for guys who do like pull-ups in their spare time and like ice baths and shit. Like
Right.
you made them think that your coffee makes them tough,
right.
which is crazy to me. Like,
Right.
and again, like I know people, like when I used to work construction, I knew guys that would only drink Black Rifle coffee. They wouldn't drink
sure.
Monster. They wouldn't drink Red Bull. They were like, nah, this is my thing. And it's like, are you like a special operator? Are you Batman? No, it's just they believe that it contributes to their identity as like a hardworking guy.
Yeah.
Which is genius. It's I know that it's kind of like empty and cynical to view it the way I do, which is like there's nothing to believe in. You're being tricked.
There's something to that. I mean,
Yes.
and it's the same on the other side of the spectrum with a Starbucks or whatever. I get it.
Yeah.
It's just these are most everything that we interact with in our life is a utility.
Yeah.
Now, the brands are points of differentiation from that. They are promises. They are, to your point, a level of identity. But for the most part, you're looking at utilities. And that's where branding gets really interesting. And that's where storytelling gets really interesting, because people will always be drawn, and it's subjective, but they'll be drawn to beautiful and interesting things. And Black Rifle coffee, not the cut of my jib for sure.
Sure. Yeah.
But you know what? You created something around it. Now, I'm a big fan of Do No Harm. As a brand, or do no harm, and it's that should be the ultimate goal. So does that really fit? Don't know.
No
maybe,
idea.
Maybe not.
Yeah.
But you could argue the same for every bougie brand that claims X, Y, and Z, right? So we're a transactional culture, so nobody necessarily wants to do any digging, or they start going down conspiracy theory rabbit holes, and here we are.
Don't start.
Right.
Don't get me going.
Our approach on like branding is that, based in like that humans are not rational, they're social.
Yep.
And that,
and tribal.
Yes. And so they have different tribes, and they're sort of like, your product needs to convey status within whatever status group your target audience is in. Right. So like Black Rifle Coffee can convey status to people in that group, but like, who don't feel like they're part of the mainstream.
Yeah.
And so those status symbols don't, they look like a sellout if they're like, I have my Starbucks or whatever.
Yeah. Or sneak it.
Mainstream status is like just conventional, like luxury products, things endorsed by celebrities who have a lot of popularity. But if people feel like they're outside of the mainstream, then they have their own sets of rules that you need to work with. And, that's something that we talk a lot about, especially with B2B companies, because they neglect that aspect of it. But it's like you're selling to construction companies is different from when you're selling to tech companies.
No, very true. And so if you think about it, there's three lanes. There's mainstream, margin, and fringe. And 10 years ago, a brand like Black Rifle would have been considered fringe, or maybe margin, but and maybe it is margin, it's in the margins, but it's mainstream for a certain subsection, because that model, I think, it's breaking up a little bit. I mean, listen, Sam, you and I are Philadelphia Eagles fans, so that immediately people know we're dirtbags. So, pretty simple.
I also I don't know if it's good or bad. I don't know if it's good or bad for businesses at large, but the increasingly, like, if you can pinpoint an area of identity, politics, and culture and sell somebody something based on that, then, like, and this, I don't know, maybe we're deviating a bit from the main topic of conversation, but that's one of the things that I always think is so interesting about smaller brands that do incredible sales and insane work. Sometimes they're just doing that, which is like, hey, this is a baby carrier for the tactical father. And you're like, what the hell is a tactical father?
I get ads for those.
And same. And it's
Sam is the ultimate tactical father.
Yeah. And it's like a baby carrier that's camo and it's got stuff. And it's like, who is this? You could dig into the nitty gritty, the minutia of who this person is to better understand the product.
Well, so I don't want to get overly political, but I will say that, so I went to middle school and high school outside of Philly in South Jersey. And I remember that, I think it was one of my history teachers. Yes, Mrs. Maddox. And this was you got to remember, this is the 80s. And she said, people are more interested in who looks better in a sweater than actual policies and stuff like that. And so it's interesting. It's interesting that really stuck with me, because I mean, that's it, going back to this cult of personality and all of that. I mean, brands are treading some really interesting lines right now with all of that. And essentially, brand America is what it is right now. And it's part and parcel because of that. And that all started decades ago. This isn't some new phenomenon. It's simply the delivery method and the acceleration of a delivery method to influence thinking or lack of thinking, for people to make a decision on their lives and not really thinking it through.
And for a brand to get any kind of purchase in a subculture, they have to alienate mainstream people to get any credibility, because that's what gets credibility in a subculture. Like, if you want, like, if you want to sell something to punks, you have to make sure that, like, you scare suburbanites, right? Yes.
Yeah.
Put it in Macy's.
Okay, I wanted to do a round table. This is a particularly Philly conversation. This is a topic. We discussed this topic in our unaired test show, but I have a grudge against brands that try to pander to, like, local culture and seem to just be doing, like, the bare minimum, like reiterating a cliche.
Right.
And, I don't understand where the idea that, like, this comes from. It feels like there's some, like, mandate that somebody higher up at these companies, like, our billboard should appeal to people locally. And then, the harried copywriter doesn't have time to, like, learn about what people in Wichita, like, what their life is like. So one example, this was a fig store. They make soft scrubs. And then to appeal to Philadelphians, they said, you invented the soft pretzel. And we invented soft scrubs.
Yeah, I mean, nobody cares. I mean, I think it's just, everyone's going to, I mean, here you go. It's like you got Pastor John. I mean, that all makes sense. I would say what's that one up top right? Yeah, it's just, why are
Squeeze
you?
this John and that John.
Yeah.
We fix Wooder, is there?
Yeah. Like, go away. Just fucking go away. No, Philly is an acute example of it. I mean, you could argue Pittsburgh is with Yens and that and all that, but no, I think it's, I see that and the worst thing that can happen with a brand is ambivalence. So if you get a reaction one way or the other, whether it's positive or negative, at least that's a reaction. When I look at this, I'm ambivalent. I'm like, okay, they fucking did that, and then I move on. So that's the way I look at it. So you're basically planting ambivalence when you do that stuff. I mean, it's like out here in the Northwest. Rain. Yeah, no shit, it rains. Seattle, rain.
Yeah.
Portland, rain. You're like, yeah, I get it. Cool.
Yeah, I had to
moved
write
on.
some ads for a voice over IP phone company that was like tailored to Austin. I was like, oh yeah, get a phone call or eating breakfast tacos.
Breakfast tacos. I was just gonna say, right?
Yeah, that's
Right. South
Brunch.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That is what we went with.
Yeah.
And I lived in Austin. I knew better. I think actually another thing that makes us hard to work with is that people bitch about their hometowns, and if you really want to like be in with them, you have to like complain about things.
Get in on the joke. Yep.
Yeah, you got to be like, hey, just remember. I don't know.
You've been an Austinite long enough when you know you can complain about the city as if you lived here your whole life, and that's like
right.
Sam had you put up a.
It takes 3 years.
Yeah,
I'm
billboard
barely accepted in Oregon, and it's 33 years.
No, in Austin, in Austin, if you're there for 3 years, you can talk about like all the great old establishments that closed.
The way it used to be.
Yeah, the way it used to be. It changes that fast. So.
It's like people from the Lower East Side, New York. Oh, it used to be grittier.
Oh yeah, CBGB's.
Yeah, right.
Yeah,
the Bowery was kicking.
The Austin Tea Party.
Now.
Right.
That's the one that I.
Sorry, this is the one thing where I think people in Austin do love these Yeti billboards. This one here, and I think it's because they're making fun of Austin. They're like, the lake's nasty.
It's disgusting.
No, it is disgusting, and and you know this, Sam. People from Austin take and they should. They take a ton of pride in Yeti. They absolutely should take a ton of pride in Yeti, in the same way that we take the same pride in Hers pretzels.
Is Yingling y'all's or is that
Pittsburgh? Yes. No, it's Pittsburgh.
Pittsburgh. Oh, okay.
That's not Philly. Yeah.
Well,
that's Western PA.
It's what we drink. If you go to a bar and you order a lager, that's what they give you.
Right.
It's the closest thing. Yeah. I did the other day at a restaurant in New York. Somebody said, give me a beer? The guy was like, what beer? He's like, he thought he was in a movie. He's like, hey, a couple shots and a beer.
Right.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
The usuals. The usual
Philly,
skinny.
You say lager.
Right.
You say lager team. So, okay, I thought we could own it. But yes, people like these in Austin because I guess because they like Yeti to begin with. This one is making fun of these ubiquitous Westlake dermatology ads, which basically are just like stock photos of models in Europe.
Oh,
and
that's
it just says like,
funny.
Get cool scoping. Everyone in Austin thinks they're hilarious.
That's great. That's really great.
Sam, you didn't see it, but there's a new one up. I wanted to take a picture of it and send it to you. It's a supplement company out of Austin, and they're all dudes from California, and it's called Stoic Supplements, and it's like a Greek god. It's very much tapping into that like Gen Z, like aesthetics, like Greek philosophy thing that's happening right now. And it's like the whole thing is like look like Michelangelo's David, but it's like workout supplements or whatever. Right. It's and the image of it. What they're selling is that I know that you're into this obscure philosophy thing, so come spend a bunch of money on pre-workout with other guys who also do they think they're Patrick Bateman from American Psycho. Yeah.
These supplements will help you return Western culture to its glory days.
Yes, exactly. Precisely.
Yeah.
Well, I don't see why that wouldn't necessarily work. I mean, I think that model, it didn't have to be coffee, right? It could have been something else that people use regularly.
Yeah.
I got another. Are we done with this topic?
Yeah, go.
Any other thoughts on local ads? Yeah.
No.
Okay. I'm glad we all agree that they suck. This came across my feed. These AI-powered BuzzFeed ads. The headline, this is in 404 Media, AI-powered BuzzFeed ads suggest you buy a hat of a man who died by suicide. This is the main example. Basically, they had this new ad plugin on their website that will pull the image and then suggest you shop things in the image. So here, I didn't screenshot it great, but here you have people like the wardrobe of the people who died in the Challenger explosion.
Oh my God.
And then this is some kind of disgusting image, and they're saying get like makeup to make your face look like these people with ancient diseases. And then you have various disasters. And the example was a story about somebody who had a rare disease and committed suicide. And then in the picture of the guy, it was like, buy the hat he's wearing.
Get this fit. Yeah, the ad thing, the AI thing is so bizarre. It's just, obviously it's to this point, it's like hacky to talk about, but I'm like, nobody quality controls this stuff? Nope. Is that like nobody takes a look at this shit?
No, it's just, it's just stupid. It's just, this is, all right. So technology, we as human beings are built a certain way. Technology moves far, far, far beyond that. There is no rational argument for trying to move faster than we need to move. Like, I get it. Sure, innovation, blah, blah, blah. I get it. Yeah, you should try. You should move. Like, yeah, go. But for the most part, technology is exhausting, at least this version of it. Because in the 1800s, it was like, what is that? Well, that's an automobile. It's like, oh, well, that's technology, right?
Right.
Humans aren't built for this. Humans aren't built for a lot of this. And it's, I really don't know where to go with this other than we get duped a lot. We absolutely get duped a lot. And you're right. There is no accountability. There's no responsibility. There are no guardrails on any of this. When you use the R word of regulation, people start screaming bloody murder. But there is no rationalization or common sense in a lot of this stuff. And again, we're not built for that. I mean, we're not built to be on 1,000 platforms and all this. It's exhausting. It's absolutely I mean, if I were in my 20s, maybe it's a different story, but, and I like to think of myself, I'm far from a Luddite. But we're just not built for any of this shit.
There's some theory that humans don't really thrive in communities that are bigger than 150 people.
Yeah.
I think because then it's not really a community. You don't know people. You don't have a sense of what's going on. And then, they notice that companies, generally a division within a company is 150 people or less, right? If you're a bigger company, you got to divide people up. It's just, there's some backing to that. But I was going to say that kind of comes back to why this moment we are in digital, where we're at in digital media, where people are like, well, I'd rather subscribe to indie agency news than check my, LinkedIn feed where I'm going to see the same 3 aphorisms restated over and over again. And
I might have written one.
People are going to try to.
Right. Well, and so you bring up that point. Someone once told me, I was explaining to what indie agency news was, and they said, well, how do you scale that? I said, I don't know. But my thinking is that it's to try to make this, I call it community as a service. And so ultimately, to your point about 150, Sam, there could be over time these natural shakeouts. It could be regional. It could be agencies by discipline, if it's strictly design agencies or whatever. So it's more TBD. But I do think that the galvanizing force of this, the unifier of this, is visibility and growing indie agency business. That's the visibility. I mean, that's you need something that's going to bring, that's going to galvanize it, that has a level of clarity to it. And just take social media, for example. Most of those platforms, you'll go into your groups and you'll do all of those things. But for the most part, there's really no galvanizing unifier in any of that. They're ad platforms, and cool.
And they're getting worse every day.
Yeah. But we're on them. I mean, we're on them.
Well, I'm going to upload this to YouTube. We're going to share a link. I'll tag you on the post, and then you pre-post it. And then
right on.
That's how it works.
Cool.
Is that where we're going to leave this?
Do you need a pithy exit?
Sure. Do you have one ready to go?
No.